Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'Hashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem, Rakakadash, double honors the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who are teaching this truth and sincerity, and shout out to the Akims out there in the four quarters of the earth proclaiming this truth. Braka the Yahweh, Braka the Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem, Rakakadash, Brakatum. So, prophecy speaking, if you hadn't heard, Babylon the Great has fallen, right? And in every way possible. Its missiles don't work. Its defenses don't work. So they're going to try to order more stockpiles of shit that doesn't even fucking work to begin with. They're losing on every front. It's this third woe that's coming quickly. They've lost on every front. And so they have nothing left. And what have we been telling? What have we been proclaiming out here, right? The 144,000, the 12 tribes, right? What have we declared? We declared that the kingdom of heaven is coming, right? On earth as it is in heaven, right? That the kingdom of heaven is coming, and to worship him that made heaven and earth, right? Revelation chapter 14, verse 8, and there followed another angel saying, Babylon the great has fallen, has fallen. That great city, because she made all the nations drink the wine of the wrath of her fornication. They were forced to do deals with her, right? They were forced to bow down to her. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand. And that is the mandate that's going to be going out very soon. They're going to implant everybody with a micro C-hip, to make everybody on that system. That system is coming, better known as the New World Order, where everybody will have to bow down and take this new system, take this implant. The same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of the Most High, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, which is ultimately World War III, and the destroying winds of them chariots, when they destroy this place like it were Sodom and Gomorrah, as it was in the days of the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah. The same shall drink the wine of the wrath of the Most High, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, and shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Ultimately, being brought before the Most High, Yahweh Shai, and the angels, ultimately cast into this lake of fire, better known as Babylon the Great. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever. And they have no rest day nor night, who worship the beast and its image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. And that's what the times that we're living in, right? We've been telling you for a long time what the MOTB really is and how it would be implemented, right? But nonetheless, though, Babylon the Great has fallen in every way possible. It no longer is the status quo. It's no longer the nation that it once was. It's not the hammer of the whole earth anymore, right? It's being cut asunder. It's losing its buying power, its purchasing power. It's losing its fear. People ain't afraid of it anymore. The weak are saying that they are strong, as this report goes into.
Donald Trump is being frozen out of deals by world leaders. You have Xi Jinping of China just putting the dagger into Donald Trump. Remember when Donald Trump said he was making a big, powerful deal with China regarding China purchasing Boeing airplanes? Well, that's falling apart. Trump's Boeing deal hits turbulence as Beijing says they just can't do a deal with Donald Trump. Remember when Donald Trump said, well, when I met with Xi Jinping back in May, we talked very powerfully, very strongly about the U.S. and China setting up a board of investment. We're going to do a board of investment together where we're going to coordinate all of this incredible trade. Well, according to some of the latest reporting out of China, the U.S.-China Board of Investment stalls before it even really took off the ground. The president of the U.S.-China Business Council says neither side has even initiated the consultation process under the so-called Board of Investment. Donald Trump likes making these splashy announcements, The Board of Peace. He says, we've done a deal between Hamas and Israel. And then Netanyahu says, no way, we're never doing a deal with Hamas. In fact, we're going to continue the genocide and we're going to go deeper into Lebanon, and Syria is the next Gaza, the Netanyahu regime says. But hey, we did call it the Board of Peace, and all Donald Trump says is, look at all the peace deals I made. And then you have Donald Trump's Undersecretary of Defense, the number 2, Pete Hegseth, over at the Defense Department. Remember, he referred to himself as a China hawk. We're going to decouple from China. We're going to show China who the real superpower is. Well, this Pentagon policy chief, Elbridge Colby, can't even get invited to...
So there you go, man. They're more bark and no bite, right? It's Trump shit. And like everything else, so has caused the fall of Babylon, right? It's no longer the threat that it once held, And so you just heard it that, Syria is going to become the new Gaza, Because like everything else, though, there was a reason why they supported Hayat al-Sham. Why Hayat al-Sham works with the Israelis, right? Because, of course, you know, it was about an Israeli takeover. So, like everything else, though, well, you know as well as I do that eventually Israeli state takes Damascus, you know. And, well, what causes this destruction? Either Iran does a retaliatory strike causing the city to cease in that day, right? Because, you know, it's really about a war with Iran, you know, and the Israeli state is just gearing up for a war with Iran, so why not take Damascus to do it? But yet, this city, Damascus, is going to become a ruinous heap. You know, it's going to cease from being a city. Well, Iran's retaliatory strikes could do that. Russia could do that. Lots of places could do that, especially once they pretty much, they got the puppet government in that they wanted, right? Hayat al-Sham, you know, which is a part with Turkey, but yet they're going to break their alliance with Turkey as well. The Israeli state, you can't make a deal with the Israeli state, man. They're in it for the long haul, the Greater Israel Project. So, like everything else, though, part of the Third World War, the main part of it is Damascus ceasing from being a city, becoming a ruinous heap, and yet all the judgments going out. Babylon the Great gets destroyed, and all the men of war are cut off in that day. Isaiah chapter 17, and it reads, "The burden of Damascus, behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap." You know, so ultimately, Damascus gets caught in the crossfire, either because the Israeli state gets it, and then, you know, there's Iranian retaliatory strikes, or Russia strikes it, or Israeli state does a Samson option. Either way, all those cards are on the table. Anything can happen. And the Third World War is coming quickly, and yet they're ushering in the new system, right? You already know about the NDAA of merging militaries together. And you already know about the draft. I mean, how much more do we have to tell you, you know? Well, we know that they're eventually, well, they're going to come after us. You know, they're going to come after us for telling the truth, you know? And so, you know, all we can do is report. "The fortress shall also cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom of Damascus, and the remnant of Syria, they shall be as the glory of the children of Israel, saith the Lord of hosts." So ultimately, you know, this place is, you know, Damascus, Syria, and yet 2/3 of our people are going to be cut off in that day, you know. So, you know, pretty much though, well, we ain't got many more prophecies to contend about, right? You know, we warned you what the MOTB is. We warned you that there's going to be a draft. All this is coming to pass right before our eyes. And we warned you that there's going to be a nuclear war between Russia and the U.S. Ultimately, Russia's going to destroy the U.S., but it's going to be, these missiles are going to be fired, 200 million of them, because that's the number of them horsemen, you know. So we're seeing all these armies being gathered together in that Valley of Jehoshaphat, which is right there in West Asia, you know, and it's really fighting over the Greater Israel Project, you know. So, and it's about a war with Iran, but it's really a third world war because everybody's getting involved with it now, you know. And Iran is no longer considered a weak nation, no longer considered a third world nation, but has pretty much said, you know, that well, they control the strait, but Trump's saying he controls the strait, but they've shown Trump to be nothing more than a paper tiger, you know, a paperweight, you know, and everybody sees that, well, the U.S. systems, they don't work. They're not going to work. And they can't protect anything. They can't protect their assets. The Iron Dome failed miserably in this war, you know. So it's just a matter of time till, you know, everything comes to naught. And we're seeing it. We're seeing a lot of moves made. So they want to usher in their new world order. That's why the NDAA is being sped up. And, you know, you get in the final merger. Now, we already know that the U.S. and Israeli state have always worked together. But you get the final merger, which is the draft, which is pretty much that it's mandatory that everybody is in the service, that everybody go over there. Even though their missiles don't work, they can't protect them. Men throwing themselves off the ships because they've been out there since November, throwing themselves overboard, trying to anyways, because they're not even being fed. They don't even feed their military, right? It's worse than Benghazi, this president, right? And you know what Benghazi was, right? You know, they pretty much, the ambassador was kidnapped and 4 Navy SEALs went in to try to save the ambassador. And then they got killed, you know. And of course, the president lied about it. Well, what Trump has done is even worse than Benghazi. He sold every U.S. Citizen out. This is no longer a sovereign nation, but it's rather the Greater Israel Project. Pretty much, the U.S. is Greater Israel. And you're seeing uproars of the people, mutinies, and you're going to see civil uprisings. This devil's coming down having great wrath. So anybody who doesn't, they're going to pull you away. They're going to be snatching a lot of people away. You think what's going on in Ukraine is bad when people are being snatched away to be sent off to war. Wait till it comes here. Wait till it comes home to roost, because you think nothing of it as long as you can go to the store and you can go get things. Oh, and did I mention the fuel? Yeah, the reserve fuel shortages. You got shortages everywhere. But eventually it's going to happen at your gas pump, at your gas station. You're going to wait 3 or 4 hours. And if you're lucky, you might get gas, but you might not. It might run out. And then you wasted 3 or 4 hours for absolutely nothing. Things are going to get much more scarce, But you see, because you think yourselves to be in good case, right? You think that victuals are cheap and that everything's going to go back to normal. It's never going to be normal. Well, there's a plan for all that, And we see this devil's mustering up his plan. The Most High is mustering up his plan, right? Because ultimately, the house of David's been built up, And we've been telling you what was going to take place way before it happened. That's how you know a prophet be among you. So he's sparing his elect. For the elect's sake, these days shall be shortened. But we're going to see a lot within the next few years, May not even be a few years, may be a few months. With the rate things are accelerating. As you can tell, though, that they have to do a ground invasion. Well, they're talking about one and another 60-day ceasefire. Extended the memorandum of understanding, which Iran already said that that deal was broke in 2 days. But Trump is claiming that, they're going to extend the 60-day from August 17th. Well, you do the math. 8 plus 2 is 10, right? 60 days from that, that's 10. That's in October. Sounds like a winter breakthrough, right? And yet, at the beginning of December, it's official that you already digitally signed the Selective Service. You're digitally signed in. The having to fill out the Selective Service form, no longer option. You're automatically selected. And the draft already being institutionalized in just a couple of weeks, maybe even 1.5 weeks. Time has gone by. This is past August 10. It's what, August 14 almost? Yeah, something like that. Let me look. It's so exciting, though, that time is going by. Yeah, it's August 14th. So things are going by really quick. They said by the 3rd week of August, right? And yet the 2nd week of August, you're going to start to see the shortages. So a lot of things are happening. It's going to catch a lot of people off guard. But we, the elect, we're not caught off guard by any of these things, right? Of course, these missiles are nothing but junk. The Patriot missile system has already been an embarrassment. The S-400s and S-300 systems blow that shit away anyways. The THAAD missile system is nothing compared to even the S-200s. How much more is Russia protecting, being a guard unto these places, right? Turkey said that, okay, you want to close the F-35 deal, right? Well, we'll just get the Su-35s. Because we're keeping our S-400 systems, right? Because they know that the Israeli state was planning to invade them later. They were no fools. Erdogan was no fool. So he already made a deal with Russia a long time ago for the S-400 systems. Now they're talking about doing some sort of trade with United Arab Emirates for that, but nonetheless, though, he can always order more. He's in good relations with Russia. So Russia, like everything else, though, is about to fulfill its role in being guard unto these places, right? So we're seeing all these armies gathered together in that valley of Jehoshaphat, So we ain't got too much longer at this, right? The Most High is speeding things up for the elect's sake, So how much more, How much more is it going to protect the elect, right? Because we've been pretty well taken care of, right? Yeah, we're going through tribulations. We're going through some hard times. Oh, and by the way, some of the hard times I was going through a couple months ago, when my dog broke her leg. Well, guess what, though? Healing, but it's probably going to take about another 9 months. But the cast is off, and it's healing. Is it the same as the leg was before? No, but I certainly wasn't going to amputate. See, I was going through all that trial, right? I was going through horrible trial because I couldn't afford the so-called surgery, which I don't put my emphasis on surgery, but that's what they told me that the next best thing to do was to cut it off, which I didn't believe that. See, I had faith in Yahweh Shai and kept praying about that. And like everything else, though, Most High shows that He's going to deliver. We're all going through trials in one way or another, right? I got even more trials coming up. I've lost my place quite a few times, I could lose this next place, but the only difference is that this place, if I lose that, I probably will never be able to afford another place again. On universal basic income, being on disability, it's kind of hard to have good credit and to make 3 times the amount of rent, because that's what California says, is that in order to even be considered, you got to make 3 times the amount of rent in order to even be considered for another place, and the cost of living being so high. But nonetheless, though, I have faith in Yahweh. Yahweh Shai is going to deliver me during those times. Sometimes I was doing videos out of a storage center. I don't know what can happen, but I do consider all the things that's already happened and that it can happen again. But I also know and have faith that Yahweh Shai is going to deliver me in those days. And like everything else, though, we're here to do a job, and our job is to warn the house of Israel, the 12 tribes, to let you know who you are, and to come back to the law, statutes, and commands of Yahweh Shai, to get right before Yahweh Shai, because this place, Babylon the Great, is about to be destroyed. And we told you who Esau Edom was, right? We've identified Esau Edom, so-called pale-skinned man, right? That looks somewhat like me. But you're going to have a lot of people that look like me who are not Edomites, that actually have the appearance of being an Edomite, but yet at the same time going to have the spirit of prophecy, which are going to be Israelite foreigners. See, this truth came to me and I understood it. You see, there's a lot of us that are going to look like the other nations, and that's what's been happening for quite some time. Why do you think things are accelerating the way they are? Because yes, our people are repentant and right, but there's still more, right? There's not 144,000 inside of Great Millstone itself, but are drawn into Great Millstone. So this devil's coming down and having great wrath, knowing that he has but a short time. And Donald Trump, he knows who we are. He called us the prophets of doom, so he knows who we are. He watches everything, That's okay, we're watching him too. We're seeing him, trip on his own shoelace pretty much, trip on his own words. He's just repeating what Fox News says, and that, oh yeah, we have this wall of steel, even though it's nothing. You got a few tankers that are out there in the middle of the ocean, right? You got a few battleships and a couple other things out there in the ocean, but it ain't even anywhere near the Navy of Iran, which you say you destroyed. It ain't anywhere near the coast of Iran, because you know that their missiles will blow the shit out of it. The USS Lincoln was hit quite a few times by Iranian missiles. All them other ships, they had to keep on moving them because they were being hit by retaliatory strikes. So, like everything else, though, men are now throwing themselves overboard because it's a losing battle anyways. It's better to just plunge yourself into the sea than it is to be there. It's better to serve a prison sentence over here than it is to be in the military. It ain't all cracked up to be, no. And you're going to be forced into it. You see, like everything else, though, the Most High is speeding things up for the elect's sake, because how deliciously they had lived, right? They lived in those, great mansions and everything, and had slaves. Thomas Jefferson had at least 200 of them that he never freed. He probably had more than that, but nonetheless, though, they lived deliciously, and they've lived on their plantations for quite some time. But yet, now their dollar ain't worth shit anymore. They ain't even got a fucking petrodollar, right? Because no oil's leaving Saudi Arabia because the Houthis have control over the Red Sea. The Houthis have control over the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. And the Persian Gulf, you can consider it over until the U.S. pays all the reparations back to Iran and and totally surrenders. Well, that's not going to happen. So pretty much so, either way, stick a fork in it, turn it over, it's done. It's well done. America's well done. It served its time, its purpose. It once was the hammer of the whole earth, but now being cut asunder. No longer will it be able to maintain its status. It's already lost its status. And that's why Gog and Magog is going to be a guard unto these places, right? Because, yeah, they're not going out without a fight, but yet their missiles are worth nothing. All the stockpiles are exhausted. Everybody's exhausted. Nobody wants to fight for it anymore. So you can see that the Most High is destined this whole thing. So how much more? We're seeing the end of Esau Edom and the ushering in of the kingdom. And we pray we're part of that hopeful elect, because a lot of heavy judgments are going out. You know, you can see what's happened with all the other things going on. Colombia being hit with an earthquake, you know, most likely a direct energy weapon, the same as Spokane. You know, all these things are taking place. You got fires going on, you got earthquakes at diverse places. All these things leading up to the return of Yahweh Shai. And in the midst of World War III, Yahweh Shai is going to show up to deliver his elect. And we pray we're part of that elect. So we tell you time and time again, get right with Yahweh Shai. While the days of mercy are still open, you know, get this while you still can. Because eventually we're not going to be out here anymore. You know, when all hell breaks loose and we can no longer, well, then you're going to find yourself in a very terrible position. And ultimately, you know, if you played around too much, you will not be spared in that day. So get this while you still can. So hopefully this has all been edifying. For that I want to say, Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahweh Shai, Hashem Rakakadash, Wa Abab the Ball. Brakatam, Jehovah elect, Shalom.